record, and I'm going to give a proper introduction. First, you need to tell me, is it Elisa or Alyssa?
It's Elisa.
Elisa. Yay,
Yep,
I had it right. Okay. I'm really excited today, you guys. Today we have holistic mama doc, Dr. Elisa Song, MD. She's a holistic pediatrician, pediatric functional medicine expert, and mama to two crazy fun kids. In her integrative pediatric practice, Whole Family Wellness at wholefamilywellness.org, she's helped thousands of kids get to the root causes of their health concerns and help their parents understand how to help their children thrive. So important the parents know what's going on. Mind, body, and spirit. By integrating conventional pediatrics with functional medicine, homeopathy, acupuncture, herbal medicine, and essential oils. These health concerns have ranged from everything from frequent colds, ear infections, asthma, eczema, autism, ADHD, anxiety, depression, and autoimmune illnesses. Dr. Song created Healthy Kids, Happy Kids to share her advice and adventures as a holistic pediatrician and mama. Now everyone can have their own virtual holistic pediatrician, which I love. And you can follow her at healthykidshappykids.com and get daily tips and inspiration from her on Facebook, which I will share all of these links with all of you, of course. And just huge welcome, Dr. Elisa, because let me tell you, in the health coaching world, we have so many families that want expert guidance. And, you know, some of these health coaches are not even moms, but they want to be able to help people. So it's great to have resources like you to lean on. So welcome. I'm so glad you're
here. Thank you so much. This is my mission. I have been a pediatric functional medicine practitioner, holistic pediatrician for, I opened up this practice 12 years ago. So I was actually one of the first, and maybe the first pediatrician to take the Institute for Functional Medicine training program. Back then there weren't modules. It was just the applying functional medicine in clinical practice. And I had nobody to guide me, like nobody. I went ahead and I took the leap and I just started doing it. And so I don't want health coaches and other practitioners who want to see kids have to stumble like I did, right? You know, I mean, you can learn so much from people who've done it before. And I just want to share everything that I can, because this is such important work. And there's an endless number of kids who need help, unfortunately.
Yes. And don't you agree that we absolutely, we can work on the, 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s, 40-year-olds, all the way down the line. But in order to see really, really big permanent change for our world period, we have to go much younger.
Oh
my gosh. So what you're doing is really just like leading the way for the future, for our future generations, right? So that we can turn around this mess that we seem to have made.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And then as health coaches, I think once you get comfortable working with children, then you understand how to work with women preconception, right? Even before they start trying, so that they can have a healthy body, a healthy womb. The dads also, right? The partners, the sperm and all of this have to also be healthy too. So we need to start before people even start trying to get pregnant. And then we will have a much healthier world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, on that note, I'm going to let you go ahead and get started with your slides so we can start learning from you. If there are questions, just you guys know the drill, put them in the Q&A. I'll watch the chat as well. Wherever you feel comfortable putting them, I'll be monitoring that. If anything comes up that needs to be answered, like kind of right away, I'll let you know. Otherwise, we'll save time at the end and we'll get everybody's questions answered.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to try to do this.
Yep, just hit the share screen and then just make sure when you pick the screen, that you pick the right one, which I've done the wrong one. I'm like, does everybody see this? And they're like, no.
Okay, so let's see. I will do that. And is that working?
That works. Yep.
Let me put that onto the slideshow so that it looks nice and pretty for you. Let's see. All right. So perfect. I have a fairly in-depth set of slides, so hopefully you won't need to take any notes. I tend to put a lot of detail on the slides, so I'm glad this is recorded so that everyone can have access to this later. But I am so thrilled that you are here as coaches and as practitioners to really learn more about how to treat kids and get comfortable with it. There's not enough practitioners out there who are comfortable seeing kids, and this really is so important, as Carmen said, that we need to really start with our children, from preconception, but, right from the time they, come out of the womb. This is our golden opportunity to create a healthy future for our kids. So Carmen already said who I was. These are my two kids, and they're my inspiration to keep going and really learn how to help my kids and kids everywhere thrive. This is just a little bit of background about my training. Just so you know that I am a board certified pediatrician. I've kind of hopped coasts all my life. I'm a New Jersey native, but I came out to California for undergrad, then back to New York for residency, and now I'm back in California. And I do lecture quite a bit for various organizations. I don't have any financial interest in any of them, though, but I do lecture for on clinical homeopathy, pediatric acupuncture, functional medicine. So these are truly my passion to teach and get out there. And Carmen did mention, I have a practice in California called Whole Family Wellness. And just last year, I started Healthy Kids, Happy Kids to really take the 12 years of experience that I have as a holistic pediatric functional medicine pediatrician, and bring that out there to parents and to practitioners everywhere around the world. So that is Healthy Kids, Happy Kids. And these are the two sites for my practice, Whole Family Wellness, and for Healthy Kids, Happy Kids. So hopefully you check it out. I have some great blog posts, and I try to update that fairly regularly without inundating inboxes. So my patient mix in the practice, it varies. I have about a third of my patients who are well kids, and these are families who really have invested in a holistic lifestyle, a healthy lifestyle. Probably the number one reason parents choose me as their pediatrician in our practice is not just because of wanting a holistic approach. I mean, they would love to have options besides antibiotics and medications when possible, but have the backup that I do have an MD license and can prescribe just in case. But really because we are open to a flexible vaccination approach and really want to have smart vaccine choices for our kids. So that is one of the main reasons that we do see children in our practice. I love seeing well kids. I love keeping them healthy and well and seeing them as they grow. But then quite a large percentage of my practice are patients with chronic illnesses. There was a time when almost my entire practice were kids on the autism spectrum. And it's amazing the work you can do with kids on the spectrum with a functional medicine approach. I've had kids get off the spectrum, and yes, recovery is possible, but it's exhausting work. And since then, I've opened up the practice, so I see many more kids with autoimmune illness, chronic conditions like asthma and eczema, reflux, chronic ear infections, Down syndrome, seizures, you name it. I mean, it's incredible the breadth of concerns that I see in kids, and it's also incredible how young these kids are. So this is where we really do need to start young to try to prevent these chronic illnesses in our kids.
Mm-hmm.
So my integrative practice, of course, I'm a conventional board certified pediatrician, but I would say I'm not really a conventional pediatrician because I do incorporate functional medicine, of course, tons of nutrition, homeopathy, traditional Chinese medicine. I do acupuncture in the practice, which is awesome, herbal medicine, and essential oils. There are so many other complementary and alternative modalities that I refer out to. You can't be an expert in all. You choose what you what draws you to it, right? And what you're excited about. But of course, there's Reiki and Ayurvedic and tons of other alternative modalities that can be helpful. But this is what I use in my practice. So why do I take an integrative approach? This is why you all are here, right? To really get to the root cause of illness, right? Find out why kids are sick, truly heal them, not just put Band-Aids on symptoms. And for our kids, this is especially important. We do want to treat that whole child, and that not just includes the body, right? This is where functional medicine is amazing at uncovering biomedical and biochemical imbalances, but really focusing on their mind and spirit as well. Truly important if we're going to get true healing. And integrating the best of all worlds, right? We have benefits of conventional medicine. Sometimes pharmaceuticals are necessary, but probably not as often as many think. And then we have all of our complementary modalities. And my goal, hopefully, is to reduce that medication overuse when possible with all the downstream effects that we see on our gut and on our hormonal balance and our immune balance. So this is how we can really get kids to thrive. I wanted to do two things in this lecture, in this talk for you. The first thing is really to go over some of the ways that I use natural medicines in my practice. So you see what the possibilities are for your kids, if you have kids, your grandkids, your nieces and nephews, your patients, and then go over a functional medicine approach to seeing kids. So again, this is my natural medicines toolbox that I use, mostly homeopathy, herbal medicine, essential oils, and acupressure. And, you know, I love homeopathy. I just have to say a word on homeopathy because this is one of the, I think, most confusing modalities for many practitioners and physicians. The principle behind homeopathy is like cures like. So we might take a substance like, you know, an example that I'll give to parents is take an onion, right? You have an onion in front of you, slice it. What happens? Your eyes start to water, you sneeze, your throat gets scratchy. The very same symptoms that you might feel when you start to have a cold or when you start to have allergies. So when you take that onion and you prepare it homeopathically, you dilute it in a very specific way, then that onion, homeopathically called allium cepa, is used to treat symptoms of allergies or colds. So homeopathy really does treat the unique individual and how that patient is experiencing their symptoms, right? Carmen and I can have the very same cold, but Carmen might have a sore throat and I might have a really stuffy nose. It's the same rhinovirus, right? But the way we're experiencing it is different. And that's why homeopathy is amazing, because there's a different medicine for Carmen to treat her sore throat and there's a different medicine for me to treat my stuffy nose. There is evidence behind homeopathy, right? There is a lot of good evidence that homeopathy can work and be effective. I do use herbal medicines. Now, with herbal medicines, I do caution parents and practitioners, just because it's natural doesn't mean it's always safe, right? Herbs are basically natural drugs, and they can have interactions in our liver and our kidneys. There can be interactions with other drugs, interactions with other medications that your patients are on. Fortunately, most kids come to me without a lot of medications, but as we see adults, many adults are on many medications, so we do need to be careful about the
Oh, we're freezing up. Hang on a moment. Is everybody else seeing that too? Got a frozen screen.
They have direct stimulation of the part of the brain called the limbic system.
Okay.
And they can affect our immune system, affect our hormones, really affect neurotransmitter production. With essential oils, it also is very important to use a reputable manufacturer so you know exactly what you're getting. You don't want to use synthetic essential oils because they're not going to have the same therapeutic property. They're going to smell good, but they're not going to have the same properties, right? And for kids, there's different ways to give essential oils. You can diffuse them, which is how I usually use them. I have a water diffuser that I put a few drops in and just let the scent fill the air. You can inhale them. I have kids sometimes, if they're getting stressed, put a few drops of lavender in their palm, rub that in between their hands, and just smell their palms. You can do that with other essential oils, like, there's a classic blend called thieves oil that you can inhale to really help boost your immune system. In the bath is a great way to get it to kids, right? Just a few drops into the bath, or massage them to their feet before they go to bed.
So tell me real quick, why are the feet the place where everyone puts everything? People talk about putting it on your feet, even remember back when my son was little, they'd say, well, put Vicks on his feet and put socks on him, and that'll help with something.
That's
I don't remember what it was. Why are the feet the entry point for so many things to absorb?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's also, in traditional cultures too, people will put a cut onion, right, on their feet and wear socks overnight, right? The feet, partially because things are so easily absorbed, right, through the bottom of the feet. We'd like to get that absorption in place. And we know everything that we put on the skin is going to be absorbed systemically to some degree. The other thing that I think also is because on the feet, you have a whole map of the body, this whole kind of microsystem where you can use, reflexology points to stimulate certain parts of your body. It's kind of like the ears and the hand also have these microcosms, the whole body imprinted, where you could do acupuncture just on the hand or just on the ear. So I think it does really affect all of our organ systems when we put it on the feet as well.
Okay.
Acupuncture, I love. I do practice acupuncture. This is actually my daughter getting acupuncture treatments. Many people, when they think about acupuncture for kids, envision acupuncture that they've had for themselves and think, well, okay, when I go to get acupuncture, I lay on the table, I'm listening to this really Zen music, and I am just laying down, closing my eyes for half an hour, right? And you think, well, how on earth is a 2-year-old going to do that? How on earth is a 7-year-old going to do that? And acupuncture for kids is very different. For kids, when they are under about 8 years of age, we don't keep the needle in. We don't retain the needle. So literally it's in, you stimulate the point and then out. So the whole session can take maybe a couple of minutes. And I'm doing acupuncture while kids are crawling on the floor, playing games, sitting on their mom's laps or reading stories. So it can be a really fun session and a very brief session. The needles are also very tiny. They're called Japanese painless needles. Now, I don't call them needles. I call them magic sticks. I call them, my magic feathers or whatever kids want to call them. But, the word needle has very negative connotations to it, especially for kids who've, gotten many shots or just had their kindergarten shots. So we just make it a game. And there are other ways to do acupuncture as well. You could do laser acupuncture, which uses far infrared light that works very well. And I might start with kids who are afraid of the needles at first. And then acupressure. Oh, here's more on acupuncture. You can do acupressure. I love acupressure. Acupressure is something that I teach parents in the office. They can learn to stimulate various acupuncture points to get that healing in place while their kids are sick, or even just to strengthen their immune systems. Acupressure uses loving touch. Now, this picture is stimulating a very potent point called large intestine 4, which is one of the most important points when you're sick with a headache, vomiting, nausea, fever, constipation. So it kind of gets rid of stuff in your body, right?
I've used it before. I used it on my husband.
Exactly.
He didn't believe me at all. He was like, oh, whatever. I'm like, just humor me, because he had a terrible headache. And I sat and did this to him and it was gone. I think 60 seconds later, he was like, how did you do that?
Yeah. So you can, you just want to apply firm pressure. You can massage the point. If you really need that point, it's going to be a little bit tender, which is okay, right? We just want to have that gentle but firm pressure to stimulate that acupuncture point.
Mm-hmm.
And then better yet, take your essential oil like lavender that's anti-inflammatory, or if you're trying to break up sinus congestion, get some thyme essential oil that is diluted in a carrier oil. Some essential oils need to be diluted like thyme because they can be a little irritating to the skin, and massage it right into that point. And you're going to feel your sinus congestion breaking up.
It's awesome.
So I wanted to run through just really quickly, how I teach parents how to use their natural toolkit at home. And I'm working on a course that should be out soon called Healthy Kids, Happy Kids All Year Long, to use these natural medicines for various acute care conditions. And this is one example, right? Because we all have fever phobia. We all do. We're afraid of fever. We don't want our kids to have a fever. What I remind parents is that fever is a natural response to infection and inflammation. It helps your body fight what's going on. So we don't want to artificially necessarily reduce fevers with Tylenol or Motrin, because studies have shown that if we reduce fevers when you're sick, it can actually prolong the duration of your illness, right? Because we're not allowing the body to do its thing. And we're also not slowing down those germs to help our body do its thing. And now there are some caveats with little babies under 3 months of age. Definitely want you to call your doctor. There are signs for meningitis, how long fevers are going, the height of the fever, any odd rashes, dehydration, where I definitely want you to see your pediatrician right away. But for the most part, kids run hot. Kids can run 104, 105 and be looking at you, no problem, running around playing, right? Whereas for an adult over 101, you feel like you just want to crawl under a rock, right?
Yeah.
So I tell parents, look at your child. Don't look at the number on the thermometer. Look at your child. If they're engaged, if they're talking to you, they're tired, but they're, acting appropriately, answering your questions appropriately, playing just a little bit, staying hydrated, then don't worry about how high it is in general. Okay. And, minimize Tylenol use. Why is that? Well, Tylenol, as many of you know, impacts the liver and reduces a very important chemical called glutathione. Glutathione is a very important antioxidant that helps us fight infections, helps reduce inflammation. And so when we reduce our body's levels of glutathione, that we are hindering our ability to fight infections and inflammation. So if you do need to use a fever reducer, I do prefer ibuprofen for the most part. Now, with fever reducers, when do I give them? Well, if my kid can't fall asleep because they're so uncomfortable, or if they are so miserable that they don't want to drink, I don't want them to get dehydrated. So that's another reason that I might use fever reducers. But with our natural medicines toolkit, so much we can do, right? So what do? I go through homeopathic medicines. The first thing is oscillococcinum, which, we're kind of heading out of cold and flu season right now, but in the wintertime, you go to Whole Foods, at every checkout, you'll see a box of oscillococcinum. And in fact, I will dig up some in my drawer in just a second because I keep it in my drawer here. But you're going to take one vial every 6 to 8 hours, 3 times. Okay, just 3 times, and that's it. There have been some good studies. Again, there are studies showing that oscillococcinum taken at the beginning of a flu-like illness with fever can shorten the duration of that illness.
I believe it. We keep it in our pants. I won't be without it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't travel anywhere without it, right? Because you can get the flu not just in the winter, but in the summer too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so there are, so this is the study that I was telling you about, right? And what oscillococcinum is. So 63% improvement in symptoms within 48 hours. That's huge, right?
That's huge.
More than half of your symptoms are going to be improved within 48 hours. And it's going to reduce the duration of your illness. I mean, this is better than Tamiflu, right?
Yeah, totally. Yes. And it tastes like candy.
It does. I mean, really, there's virtually no child who doesn't like taking homeopathic medicines. I will say, I have had some kids with, significant sensory issues that might have a little trouble, but for the most part, hands down, your kids are going to love them, right? The other thing, because homeopathic medicines are so safe, we do tell kids this is medicine. We don't just eat it like candy, even though it tastes like candy. Right. But even if they were to down the whole vial of homeopathic pellets, it's not going to be toxic, right? So we don't have to worry about harm to them. Okay. Right. I'm sorry, my headset keeps slipping a little bit, so I have to adjust my earphones. But all right, herbal medicines. So I do use a lot of herbal medicines too, when kids are getting sick. And this is what I use too, right? This is for kids and adults, but as a pediatrician, this is how I counsel my kids. There is a Chinese herbal line called Con Herbs that is amazing. They have a Gentle Warriors line for children, and they have one formula called Windbreaker. We travel. So when we were in Colorado visiting family over the Christmas holidays, we had an 8-ounce bottle with us, right? Because if anyone started to get sick, a few squirts in their mouth, and then they're done, right? That and the oscillococcinum. It is a bit bitter, right? These Chinese herbal formulas are a little bitter, but I started my kids young, right? I started my kids at, under a year of age when they started to get their colds. Of course, my younger son got his colds much sooner than my daughter did. And they're used to it, right? And they like it, and they just open up their mouth like little birds, and because they know it also helps them to feel better much faster. Mm-hmm. There's another herbal formula called V-Clear or Umka cold care syrup. This is an African bush herb called Pelargonium sidoides, found to be very effective in reducing cold and flu upper respiratory symptoms. This one tastes delicious. It's a cherry flavored syrup. This one you can easily find at Whole Foods as well. So this is another go-to for when you have a fever. Vitamin D, a must, right? Vitamin D, if you follow any of the work I do, you know how important I think vitamin D is. It's one of the supplements that I am most religious about giving my children. And in the beginning of an illness, you absolutely want to boost up your vitamin D levels because you will enhance the levels of a protein called cathelicidin that has antimicrobial properties, right? And there are some other herbal combinations that you might use. This is not anything you have to do all of, right? These are just choices, right? This Echinacea asparagus is a chewable if your kids like chewables. Elderberry syrup was found to have in vitro activity against H1N1. Remember the H1N1 epidemic, the scare years ago that didn't end up being nearly as bad as it, was touted to be. But in vitro, right, in the lab, similar activity to the flu as Tamiflu. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Right?
Yes.
Kimchi, fermented kimchi, right? I'm Korean. I
Mhm.
love kimchi. You know, I grew up on kimchi. Kimchi was found to also inhibit H1N1 activity in vitro,
Really?
right? So, you know, eat your kimchi, eat your fermented
Right.
foods over the winter, right? Um, vitamin C and herbal teas. I love giving teas to kids, right? They can drink it hot. You can make a jello out of tea, popsicles out of tea, right? But you could add honey if they're not under one. But they're a great way to get in some hydration and some therapeutic benefits as well. Okay. These are some of the homeopathic medicines. And remember, I said homeopathic medicines have to be individualized to work effectively. And so these are some of the ways we might individualize the homeopathic medicines for fevers. There are a long list of homeopathic medicines for fevers, but these are three of the most common. Belladonna is, you know, for really bright red face, sweaty, you know, sudden high fevers. Aconitum is that same sudden high fever, but if they're really dry in the face. And ferrum phosphoricum, I love. It's my go-to for that very gradual, you know, they're a little warm. You kiss their forehead, you think, oh, they feel a little warm. They're a little glassy-eyed. I think something's happening. That's when you start the ferrum phosphoricum, right? It's at the beginning of any illness when you have just a slow onset of symptoms. And then acupressure. I mentioned large intestine 4, which is right here in between your thumb space and your second finger. Large intestine 11 is right at the crook of your elbow, the outer edge of your elbow crease, right? Two very potent points to get out toxins in the body, get out heat, get out fevers. And again, you can rub essential oils into those points. If your child is hot and sweaty and they're just, you know, they want all the covers off, you can use peppermint or eucalyptus essential oils on these points to help cool their body down. If they have a fever but they're cold and shivering, right, you want to use cinnamon to help bring the heat out and help them to sweat. Okay, so different oil blends that you can use as well.
That's it's just intuition, that's instinct. Like when I saw the word peppermint, I thought cooling. When I saw the word cinnamon, I thought warming, right?
That's right.
That's just, I mean, but we overlook those things, I think, so much. We don't, you know, we don't just stop for a moment and think, well, that makes sense.
It totally makes sense, right? What happens when you drink that peppermint tea? You feel a cool rush in your mouth. And you're like, this is really refreshing,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And cinnamon tea, your belly warms up,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
absolutely it makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was a hugely fast run through. But, you know, if you would like, and you absolutely can, you know, send your clients here, but this is an ebook that I wrote, you know, on the top 5 mistakes that parents make when their kids have a fever. And it has all of these herbal and homeopathic and acupressure point formulas that I mentioned just now, so you can peruse it further. But I just wanted to have this information here for you, so you know, there's so much that integrative work has to offer for our kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is just one of the possibilities. You know, you name it, any acute condition, stomach flu, ear aches, cough, asthma, exacerbations, you will get so much more healing if you can use that integrated medicine toolkit, because unfortunately in conventional medicine, we don't have that much to offer until our kids are really sick and need antibiotics, right? But in that wait and watch period where now Sudafed isn't recommended, Benadryl doesn't work, right? You know, you're waiting and watching and you're hoping your kid gets better. But wouldn't it be awesome if your parents and you could have something to do that's actually going to help them get better faster and avoid the need for those antibiotics when possible, right? And strengthen their immune system for the next time, right? So they don't get as sick the following round.
Yeah, because the treatments can cause them to be sicker the next time around, right?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a bit about a couple of things. I know that I'm the queen of questions. Like something always comes up when I'm learning and listening. So you mentioned something at the very beginning about flexible vaccinations. Can you give us like a general, just your thoughts on, first of all, vaccines? You don't have to give us, you know, I mean, just your thoughts. We all know that everyone has their opinion on this. It's a very hot topic, but you mentioned the flexible vaccine. I'm assuming that is like, you know, doing a couple shots here, coming later for more type of thing. But will you kind of go over what your thoughts are on that?
Yeah. And, you know, I've been working on actually an article on this for the Healthy Kids, Happy Kids audience, because it is such an important topic. And I tell parents who come to see me in the office, whether or not to vaccinate or how to vaccinate your child is one of the most difficult decisions you will ever have to make for your child. I also tell parents that I believe that this is your decision as a parent, right? And my job is to hopefully inform you so that you feel comfortable with your decision. That decision should never be based on fear, one way or the other, right? You should never feel forced to do anything or not do anything, right? It's also a very personal decision because no one but your child has their individualized risks, right, for either getting severely ill from some of these infections or having serious adverse vaccine reactions. Unfortunately, in California, with this bill SB 277 that was passed last year, parents don't really have as much choice as they used to in terms of vaccines. I tell parents I am not anti-vaccine and I'm not pro-vaccine. I am smart vaccine, right? And that means really individualizing the risks. So I don't have a schedule, right? I don't have a set schedule because it has to be individualized. What I do know is that for families, the kids that I have seen and the kids that have been awarded damages in vaccine court, and there have been many, those kids have often been found to have underlying mitochondrial problems, okay? Now, the problem with mitochondrial dysfunction is often we don't see it until there's a stress to our immune system, like an illness or a shot. But there are clues that your child might be at risk for mitochondrial dysfunction, and those include low muscle tone. These are the babies who they slump all the time. They don't sit with the straight back, or older kids who sit in that W position, right? They're on the floor and their knees are splayed out, to the side of them. Their core tone is weak. They may seem really strong, but their muscle tone in their core is really weak. When they get sick, they tend to have regressions or take a very long time to recover. If there's a family history of autoimmune issues, neurodevelopmental issues, ADD, autism, methylation issues, early heart disease, psychiatric problems. Those tell me that there is in that child a higher risk of methylation and metabolic and mitochondrial problems. Does that mean that child can't get vaccine safely? Not at all, right? But especially for those children, I want to make sure that they are fully supported with methylation supports, like methylated B12 and folic acid, that their mitochondria are supported with things like CoQ10, that their detoxification systems are supported with things like glutathione that I mentioned before, right? In terms of fever. So if kids are fully supported, then they should be able to handle vaccines and other stressors just fine. With that being said, I do typically recommend and like to see kids just getting one shot at a time at first to see how they handle it. And then we also know if that child had no problems with that shot, then the next time we're more comfortable with it. If kids get multiple shots at once, we also don't know which shot they reacted to, right?
Yep.
I also like to make sure that kids are absolutely healthy and well when they get their shots. Right now having a low-grade fever, the American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC doesn't recommend that as a contraindication to shots, but I mean, why? With plenty of time, one of the concerns is, parents don't have to come back. I don't know any parent who would say, I don't want to come back, right? I mean, parents will say, I will come back anytime, right? So just wait until your child's fully well, right? We don't want to have another added burden to the immune system for several reasons, right? If their kids are sick, we don't want to stress their immune system and then have them get even sicker. Also, if we're going to give them a vaccine and we want their body to react appropriately and their immune system to react appropriately, we want them to have a good positive response to the shot, right? We don't want them to not mount a good immune response because their immune system is otherwise occupied.
Right.
So, I mean, those in general are my approaches. And then, I talk to parents about daycare plans, about travel plans, internationally especially. Exposures from relatives, to various illnesses. And then we come up with an individualized plan, and that plan is flexible. It can change as things get older. If kids start developing asthma or signs of autism or whatever it might be, there's no hard and fast rule, right? We work with families here to make sure that things are done safely and really for that child.
Right. That's great. That's a great answer. And, when my son was, he was vaccinated, but the last set of, or no, I would say the second set of vaccines, I started to get that little bit of nervousness about it. And then the third set, I was like, we need to space it out. And they thought that was ridiculous, but I felt more comfortable doing that. And I was, strong about my opinion about that.
Yeah.
But most recently, the interesting thing came up. My pediatrician is wonderful. He used to be our neighbor in our old neighborhood, and he's great. But we definitely started to have some differences of opinion. As an example, my son has Cateris pilaris. Is that how you say that?
Keratosis pilaris. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So my thing was to take him off dairy and see if we could get some improvement, because he's already a gluten-free, soy-free, organic, non-GMO kid. I thought, well, the only thing you're doing, even though it's grass-fed, is dairy. And so I was telling the doctor about that, and he said, "You're going to love this. Why would you want to get rid of that at all?" And I said, "Well, he is very self-conscious at 12. Girls are starting to know, that kind of thing." And he said, "Well, kids who have that typically don't have acne when they get older. So why don't you just leave it alone so you can reduce the chance of him getting acne when he's a teenager, which is much more embarrassing than what he's going through right now." And I thought, uh-oh. Okay. So in that same visit, one of the conversations was this new vaccine for cancer for girls, teenagers. What is
HPV? It's a human papillomavirus, the Gardasil.
And he is very much for that shot. I am not for that shot. What are your thoughts about that shot? Because that is a big topic over where I live right now.
It's a big topic everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I do have very big concerns about the HPV vaccine for kids who have an autoimmune history in the family. The reason is that is one of the vaccines that in the literature, right? And there is literature on adverse effects of vaccines, either, in vivo, meaning in people, and also in vitro, kind of theoretically, and in animal studies for many of the vaccines. So, I mean, it is not true that vaccines are totally safe. Nothing is 100% safe, right? So it doesn't make sense that vaccines would be. And we do patients and parents a disservice by trying to, in the medical field, promote that view, right? Because it does, I think, engender a mistrust that we're not telling everything, which is true, right? But I think that most physicians, it's not because they have any ill will. They just don't know, right? They don't know the research. They're not looking at the research that other people are looking at, things that I'm looking at. And the HPV vaccine in particular, there is mounting evidence that it is linked with a syndrome called ASIA, ASIA, okay, which stands for autoimmune and inflammatory syndrome induced by adjuvants. Okay, so ASIA. So this is really the components, the adjuvants like aluminum in vaccines that are there to sort of stress the immune system and mount an immune response, right? So that you actually respond to the vaccine. The adjuvants, the fillers themselves, can create this autoimmune reaction. And the HPV vaccine is one in the literature that many authors have written about. So again, not that it's harmful for everyone, but if you have an autoimmune family, I would have caution. The other thing to note too is the HPV vaccine. It used to have, now it's 9 strains, right? It started off with 4 strains. And then we find, well, those strains, actually it might have been, 4 strains. And then, they picked the strains that were the most prevalent for causing cervical cancer. Then they realized, well, some strains mutate, there are more strains, so they add 9 strains. Eventually, there are going to be strains that mutate, and then it might be 13 strains, which is what happened with the pneumococcal vaccine, the Prevnar, for kids. It used to be a Prevnar 7, when it first came out. Now it's a Prevnar 13. The 7 strains that originally protected against of pneumococcus mutated, so it wasn't working anymore. So at some point anyway, even if you get the shot, it may stop working. It also doesn't protect against the many, many other strains of HPV that causes things like cervical and genital warts. Cervical cancer, now cancer is a very scary word, and I would never want anyone to get cancer, but cervical cancer is entirely treatable when caught early. It should not, if we are getting regular GYN care, it should not be missed, and it should not be incurable. Now, again, this is here in the United States, right, where there is access to good care, and hopefully everyone does get and deserve that good care. But I do, yes, have cautions and, theoretical concerns with the HPV vaccine.
Yeah, well, that's great. That's good information. I had a couple of friends whose children are heading into that high school age, and they've been, concerned about it. So this is good information to share. Let's take a moment and look at some questions here. I'm going to check the chat in a moment, but Gabriella is asking, do you use, I'm going to butcher this, Yin Chow? And have you found a good brand that doesn't contain lead? CHIAO.
Yep. So Yin Chow and also Gan Mao Ling, those are two classic Chinese herbal formulas for wind heat and wind cold. Wind is what in Chinese medicine sort of attacks you, right? When you have a fever and chills and a cold. The windbreaker that I mentioned, okay, that's sort of a combination of sort of Yin Chow and Gan Mao Ling together in a tincture that can help with wind heat or wind cold issues. And it's made by a company called Con Herbs, which is right down here in Scotts Valley, down by me in California. And they batch test, all of their herbs, make sure that there are no impurities, no heavy metals. So definitely a reputable company to use.
Good. Excellent. Okay. So the other thing I had a question about was asthma. So I have lots of friends with children that are, that have asthma or developed asthma as they started getting into school age. Where does asthma come from? What is the cause of asthma?
Well, how about this? Because I have a ton more slides on functional medicine in pediatrics that I want to go through, and then I'll run through my pediatric functional medicine approach for asthma. Because yes, there's so many kids with asthma and eczema. This is an atopic, class of illnesses, and we're seeing a huge surge, right? A huge rise in that. And that really, for you health coaches out there, practitioners out there, you will do so much good for your kids if you can really start with that functional medicine approach for them. Okay. So let's see if I can get this slide moving forward. Got it. So functional medicine in kids, we know many, many health conditions, chronic health conditions are on the rise in kids. We mentioned atopic illness, but there's cancers, there's autoimmune illness. It's incredible, the rise in autoimmunity in our kids. And I see many, many kids with autoimmune illness, juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis. I used to think that, one of the youngest kids that I'd seen with autoimmune illness was an 18-month-old who was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis.
Oh my goodness.
But, just a couple of years ago, unfortunately, that child was beat by a 6-month-old who was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. I mean, unbelievable, right? Wow. Unbelievable. So our kids are coming out into the world with this immune dysfunction already. Endocrine disorders, neurodevelopmental disorders, autism. It's not just being diagnosed more. We do have more kids on the spectrum. And we do have more kids with sensory issues and behavioral issues. And then this whole class of neuropsychiatric disorders called PANDAS or PANS. This is pediatric acute neuropsychiatric disorder associated with strep, or pediatric acute onset neuropsychiatric syndrome, where kids will get an infection like a strep infection, be completely, neurotypical, behaving normally one day, they get the infection, and then all of a sudden, rages, fears, OCD, tics, anxieties, debilitating to many kids. More and more commonly, I'm seeing this. Another startling fact is, this is back in 2005, that for the first time, this is a New England Journal of Medicine study showing that for the first time, because of lifestyle changes and also the rise in childhood obesity, this is the first time that our children are expected to have shorter lifespans than their parents, right? Unbelievable, right? Unacceptable. Right? We think that we have advanced so much in medicine, and yet, it's these lifestyle changes, right? It's functional medicine approaches that we need to get our kids healthier, right? I mean, that's not okay that our kids aren't living as long as we are.
No.
Right? So why is this? Well, all of you know this, right? There's this overconsumption, undernutrition, right? We're eating too much, but not enough of the good stuff, right? Excessive hygiene, overuse of medications and pharmaceuticals, and environmental toxicity. This is what our kids are facing. This is what we didn't have nearly as much of when we were growing up. And every generation is having worse and worse lifestyle influences on their health, right? This is our standard American diet, right? And then you have the Diet Coke, right, which is probably worse than the regular Coke. I found this picture. I mean, this is hilarious, right? This is Diet Coke Plus, right? You feel better because it has vitamins and minerals added to it, but come on,
I know,
right?
right? I just saw that. I'm like, really?
Yeah,
Vitamins and minerals? Okay.
yeah. So you probably have heard this, but we are the most overfed, undernourished population in the world, right?
Yeah,
It's
embarrassing.
Yep, too many refined foods, too much junk and crap in our diet. And in fact, this is really from the FDA down. The regulations in what can be put into our food and into our vaccines is not nearly as regulated as in other countries. And there's no other country that allows as much junk, in what we put into our bodies and our kids' bodies as the United States. And so what can we do? We have functional medicine, right? So functional medicine really offers that broad systems-based context, right? To really look at how the environmental inputs to our kids, from the air they breathe, the food they're eating, the water they're drinking, the thoughts they're thinking, right? All of the environmental inputs then trigger and interact with their lifestyle factors and genetic predispositions to produce chronic infection, right? And there's really no time to waste, right? Our kids are getting sicker and sicker, and that's why this is, we need functional medicine practitioners to start seeing kids now. In functional medicine, it is truly personalized medicine, right? We're getting to the root cause and finding these core clinical imbalances, just like you do for adults. The principles are the same. There are some different guiding principles, but the underlying functional medicine principles are the same. We're trying to identify the core clinical imbalances, right? This is a beautiful functional medicine tree, right? Where we look to see, we have our underlying genetic predispositions, right? What we bring with us in life. We can't do anything about that, right? But our genes don't dictate who we are and what we become necessarily. We have then all of these inputs, right? Everything that goes into our body that then interacts with our genetic predispositions and what we bring with us in life to then result in signs of either being well or signs of being not well, right? And we can have then different imbalances in all of these different areas. So we use that tree to guide us. And really, there is not any chronic condition in pediatrics that would not benefit from a functional medicine approach. Right? These are some of the things that I see, but I mean, you name it. Any kid comes in front of you, start your functional medicine approach, and you will get them better. Right? It's not always an easy road, right? Just like with adults, right? Some kids, 2 sessions, you're like, oh my gosh, their asthma's gone, right?
Right.
Other kids, you're going to be with them for a couple of years, and that's okay, right? It's a journey, right?
Yeah.
And everyone has their own story. But with kids, I mean, this is the same with adults, but with kids, you start with the gut, right? Kids are all about assimilation. I love that word assimilation, right? Because kids are assimilating the world around them. They're assimilating nutrients into their bodies. They're assimilating thoughts into their brains and, what they believe and what they think, right? They are assimilating their feelings and how they're going to embody, how they live and how they experience their emotions and state and stress, right? So assimilation is key, and that starts with the gut in our kids and stress, right? This is one of the most overlooked areas in, I'm not going to say it's overlooked. We pay a lot of lip service to it in functional medicine.
Yep.
We don't do enough about it. And this for kids, absolutely important, because you will not get true healing if you don't address the constant state of stress that most of our kids are in, especially when they have chronic illness. Okay.
100%. Yes.
Yep. So we start with those, and then we use a functional medicine matrix to fill in the other areas, because of course they have detoxification issues. Of course they have energy production issues. But if you start with the gut and the emotional piece, many other things will fall into place. Okay. So my approach with kids, when you are working with a child, yes, you're working with the parents, but that child is your patient. And when I have a kid, even if they're 6 months of age and they're smiling, but they're not talking, the first person I greet in that room is that child, right? Because it sets that dynamic that, you are there for that child to do the best that you can for that child. And you will partner with the parents in that interest, right?
Right.
The other thing too to know is that children can respond amazingly quickly, right? Like I said, some kids, it's just 1 or 2 tweaks in their diet and supplements and they're on their way. But by that same caveat, then you want to start low, right? Don't dump in 10, 20 different supplements at once, right? Start with kind of the key imbalances and go slowly, because oftentimes you'll see that things fall into place. This is where you do have to partner with parents, of course, because they're the ones that are going to be doing the cooking, and they're the ones who are going to be mixing the supplements, and ask them how they want to proceed. I have some parents who come in here and they say, okay, I need to eliminate these 5 or 6 different foods. We're going to do it today. I'm going to clean out the cupboard. Give me the 10 supplements. I'm on it, right? Mm-hmm. Other parents, you ask them to take out one thing in their diet and it's like the world just fell apart, right? Yes. And that's okay, right? You have to meet parents where they're at, because if parents feel overwhelmed and feel like they can't do it, then they're not going to be able to do it, right? And so close follow-up is really important, right? You just walk through with parents, be not just a cheerleader for that child, but for the parents as well, right? And you just make sure that you let them know this is doable, even if it takes a year to get an elimination diet in place. That's okay. It's not a marathon. It's not a race. It's a marathon, right? And we're going to do it together. Right? I
agree. I had a child with rheumatoid arthritis. She was diagnosed at age 4. She was 12 when they finally came to me, and the doctor had said, I'm about to start her on methotrexate, an immunosuppressive drug that could cause fertility problems. And her dad called me crying, literally, and he said, this is our last hope. We don't know what else to do, but I want my daughter to be able to have children. Yeah. Fast forward, went over to the house, and the parents were very gung-ho. The daughter was too, but the youngest one, who also had psoriasis, eczema, fatigue, all of this, she wasn't the person we were working on. Yeah. But they cleaned everything out, and everyone in the family benefited. And part of the process, in my opinion, was that, don't expect your child to give up nightshades, gluten, soy, dairy, all of those things, if you are going to be bringing home McDonald's and fast food for yourself and your other child.
That's
the whole family got on board, and they lost tons of weight. She never went on the methotrexate. Her joints stopped swelling. The other daughter's skin cleared up. It was amazing. It's really one of my biggest success stories.
That's right. That truly is one of the most important lessons right there. You have to make it a family affair when it comes to children, right? Our kids are watching us. They're doing what we do, not necessarily what we say, right? And so you have to model what you would like them to do. And that way too, you learn together and you make mistakes together, right? Because we learn from our mistakes. First time you go out to a sushi restaurant, oh my gosh, I forgot the tamari, right? To bring my gosh,
yes, that's me.
Right? But then the next time you remember, right? And your child is going to remember with you, right? You learn when you make those mistakes, and so that the next time you do better, right? And that's how we do it, right? We do it together, right? Now, to get kids to take supplements, there are lots of different tips and tricks, but the first, and so these are some of my tips that I talk to parents about. Right. The first thing is start slowly. If you give your patient, 5 different supplements to start on your little supplement plan, just tell them start with one, right? You don't have to start with all of them at once, and start with the one that tastes the least like anything. Right? Like probiotics are pretty easy to give, but if I ask a parent to start with a sulfury tasting smelling glutathione, the kid's not going to want to take anything, right? Start with something that's really bland. Don't ever lie that you put something in your kid's food or drink, because then they will not touch anything you give them afterwards. Right? You tell them, you tell your kids, we are working to get your body as healthy as we can be. We're doing this together. And that means that you might have to take some vitamins, right? These are your medicines, right? So be consistent and firm, right? This is not a choice. We're going to take it slowly, right? But this is something we have to do to get healthy, right? Try not to put it into their favorite food or drink. Like if they love applesauce, you might think, oh, I'm going to put it into their applesauce, but then you might ruin the applesauce for them, right? So try to put into something else besides what their favorite is, right? Use positive reinforcement, and reinforcement doesn't have to be M&Ms, right? It doesn't have to be sweets, but use something positive to get them incentivized, whether it's, wow, if you do a great job, we take these supplements without whining for a week. Okay, we get to go to Great America on a family trip, right? Whatever it might be, right? Kids can learn to swallow at surprisingly young ages. I have a 3.5-year-old who can swallow pills, right?
Wow.
There are pill swallowing cups like this one called the Oraflow. I'm sure there are other ones. If your patient or your child is working with an occupational therapist, they can absolutely help your child learn how to swallow pills if that's one of the goals that you ask for. There are some good online tutorials too. Syringes, right? Just get big eyedroppers or syringes. If you squirt that supplement, with a little puree in the back of the mouth between the gum, the cheek, you're going to avoid all those taste buds in the front of your tongue.
Yep.
So they're not going to taste it as much, and they're going to swallow it pretty quickly.
Yep.
Okay. I do like to put any liquid or powders, if possible, in a covered container, especially the ones that smell like glutathione. Remember, we taste not just with our tongue, but also with our eyes and with our nose. And if we see something that looks kind of mucky and green and it doesn't smell very good, I mean, who's going to want that, right?
I have a problem with glutathione. I'm the one that I have to put it in a little orange juice and my mitochondrial drops and just
That's right.
hold my breath. Yeah. So it's terrible.
Yep. Yeah. And then what do we mix it in, right? Smoothies are great, right? But tip, get a little shot glass, put your supplements, powders, liquids into that shot glass with the smoothie, have them drink it first, and then drink the rest of the smoothie plain, right? A couple of things. If you put into that huge glass of smoothie, and they only take 2 sips, you don't know how much they've gotten at all.
Right.
And then secondly, then they get to have some smoothie that doesn't taste like it's full of supplements.
Yeah.
A tart, dark juice like pomegranate or blueberry will mask flavor and color much better. Cold things mask flavor better. Frozen grape juice concentrate, right? Super sweet, but you get that slush and you mix things in and take a spoonful, and that can mask things. Of course, you can add sweeteners. You can make Jell-O, right? I mentioned I made herbal tea as a Jell-O for my son when he was sick. But you can put all the smoothies into a Jell-O. Just do it as it's cooling, because not all things can get heated up, right? Make an ice cube popsicle, right? And put things into the freezer, and kids can have it that way. You can get some chocolate chips. Now, if you're, Enjoy Life is one of my favorite brands, right? They're soy-free, gluten-free, dairy-free, egg-free. But you can melt the chocolate as it's cooling, put it on some wax paper, mix in the supplements, and make a big chocolate chip, and kids can eat it that way. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
You can bake many supplements. Now, not probiotics, right, that are heat sensitive, nothing else that's heat sensitive. So check the label or find out from the manufacturer if they're heat sensitive. But things like minerals, calcium, magnesium, you can easily bake into, a treat for your child. Nut butters or seed butters you can mix into. They're because they're thicker, they can mask some of that grainy texture a little bit better. Gummies, if you've ever made herbal gummy bears or gummy drops, you can easily put supplements in, just like with those chocolate chips, and make gummies as well, right? So lots of different options there. You just try what works best, okay? And you can use a combination of these as well. Pediatric dosage, right? So I do use a lot of herbs in kids, same things, and supplements, nutritional supplements. These are just some formulas that you might find online on how to, because we don't have clear guidelines on how to dose kids. Now, I typically use the bottom rule. I just take the kid's weight, right? And then see about approximately what percentage of an adult their body weight is, and then take that percentage of the supplement, right? It's not an exact science, but we approximate.
Right. And let me just throw this out there too. As health coaches, you guys know you're not supposed to tell anyone how much of anything to take or even what to take. So these are great resources for you to share with your clients and their children, and let them make a decision on what's best for their child, as opposed to telling them, do this Dilling's formula. You can say, here are several formulas and ideas for you to choose from. We want you to go ahead and make your own decision based on what you feel comfortable with.
That's great. Great advice, Carmen. Great. Yeah. Because of course we all have to, we can give these resources and guidelines, but we still want to work within our scope and make sure that we're providing the best counseling that we can.
Yep.
And these are just some conversions if it's liquid dosages. Okay. So assimilation, right? The gut. This is the cornerstone of functional medicine, but the cornerstone if you're working with kids. Absolutely. Because the gut is connected to everything, right? The gut whole body connection. So we know about the gut-brain connection, and our kids are suffering from anxiety, depression, ADD, autism. It's unbelievable the number of kids with anxiety these days without the tools to handle it, and with the biochemical imbalances underneath to make it even harder. It's the heart of our immune system. And because we're seeing so many kids with these itises, right? asthma, eczema, sinusitis, otitis, chronic otitis, right? Autoimmune disease. We need to deal with the gut first. The gut hormone connection. I'm seeing younger and younger kids with subclinical hypothyroidism and outright Hashimoto's. I mean, these are school-age kids. School-age kids, 5-year-olds with signs of adrenal fatigue on cortisol testing, right? Either they're in adrenal fatigue or they're in a constant fight or flight state and they're heading into adrenal fatigue, right? But these are kids, right? These are not, 30, 40-year-olds who are burnt out from work. I mean, these are kids, right? That shouldn't be in this state. The gut metabolism connection, the number of kids who are overweight or who are, quote, thin, but, they're quote, fat on the inside, right? I mean, they have an overweight metabolism on the inside, even though they don't look overweight, and have metabolic syndrome and PCOS, right?
Yes.
These are problems for our kids, not just adults, right? So we need to look at the gut first because it all starts in the gut, every single one of these problems. And if all you did was work on the gut, you would get the majority of your patients feeling better, right? So what does gut dysregulation cause? Of course, the dysbiosis with abnormal bacteria. What causes gut dysregulation? So dysbiosis, bacteria, viruses, parasites, yeast, drugs, not just antibiotics, but antacids. The number of kids who are being put on Zantac at 2 weeks of age because they're fussy and colicky, right? I mean, some babies do have true reflux disease, but many do not. Right? Many are fussy, and if they could just take the dairy out, they would, or get probiotics, they wouldn't be as fussy and quote colicky, right? This undernutrition, food allergies and sensitivities, stress, C-section birth, from the very beginning, changes the composition of the gut microbiome in our babies. Formula feeding. Now, I understand not everyone can breastfeed, but, that does set up, unfortunately, the groundwork for having that gut dysregulation. And, of course, leaky gut. Those are the most important things that I see in kids. And this is an article from 2005, but leaky gut is implicated in many, many pediatric illnesses. Many. And I would say probably all chronic illness, right?
Yes.
And then foods. We talk about leaky gut, and this is really looking at delayed food sensitivities, but for kids, it's more than just that. Kids can react not just to the food, but also to what's in the food, right? Additives. Right? Additives are a huge deal for many kids. These artificial flavors, dyes, preservatives are poison to some kids, especially with neurosensory and neurodevelopmental issues, attention issues. And of course, there's antibiotics and hormones in many foods. All right, so this I show parents and practitioners. Have you seen this, Carmen? Right, and many of you guys have probably seen this, right? So I just show this and I say, what do you think this is? Right? Who knows what this is? Well, this is FDA approved natural strawberry flavoring. Right. So, and look at these. There's solvents. There are things that uses paint thinners, right? There are things that are known to be toxic to the lungs and to the skin. But this is what the FDA has approved to be in your natural strawberry flavored waffles or Pop-Tarts or whatever it might be, right? This is what you're getting. So
it even says it, solvent.
Read labels. Yes. So read labels, right? So when our kids have reactions, they can have true allergies, which are IgE mediated. These are the hives, the scary anaphylactic reactions, which unfortunately are getting more common. But when we're talking about healing the gut, we're also talking about these non-IgE sensitivities, mostly IgG that are delayed, right? That can happen 3 to 5 days after eating a food. There's also intolerances. Most babies are not lactose intolerant, right? That's just not, breast milk, the primary sugar in breast milk is lactose. So it makes absolutely no sense that they're sensitive, that they don't have lactase. What is more likely the case is that they're sensitive to the casein, right? Or one of the proteins in dairy. Artificial additives I mentioned. Now, in the European Union, any food with artificial colors and preservatives have to have a warning label that food might cause behavioral and attention problems in your children. Right?
Really?
But we allow these in America, right?
Of course we do.
Phenols are a category of foods, a category of ingredients in foods that are naturally occurring, very good for you for the most part, right? These are the colorful, red in the grapes, purple in the grapes, and the red in the strawberries, and the blue in our blueberries. But for some kids, when they'll get the bright red cheeks, bright red ears, and it will cause attention and behavioral problems, similar to these additives, okay? Oxalates are another food that can cause gut dysbiosis, yeast problems, attention problems, and pain. Histamine, right? I see a lot of kids with histamine-related problems where their body just can't tolerate foods, even the best, so the best fermented foods cause huge reactions they can't tolerate. That's a tip-off that they have a histamine problem that needs to be addressed. And then FODMAPs, right? This low FODMAPs, these fermentable sugars in foods that cause irritable bowel symptoms. These are all different ways that kids react and do react to food. So I investigate all of these, not just IgG reactions, which are what many functional medicine practitioners kind of stop at.
Right. Do you run the IgG, IgA subclass series of tests for people to check on, any kind of immunosuppressive problems or immunocompromised deficiencies?
I do run IgG food panels, right, in kids, just because, as an adult, we can do an elimination diet, but for kids, it is a lot harder to do. It's a lot harder for parents to do for kids, unless they have kind of in front of them a guideline. And I tell parents no test is perfect, but it's a roadmap. At least it's a start.
Okay.
I do also try to do a celiac panel before I eliminate gluten. Because once you eliminate gluten, the kids are doing great. If you want to check for celiac, you have to reintroduce that gluten, which is something that most kids don't tolerate and that I don't really want to do.
Yeah.
Some principles to prevent food allergy and start off with the healthy gut microbiome. This is where we would start off with, if we could, knowing that it is very difficult to change the composition of the gut microbiome after 2 years of age. Very important to know. What's set at 2, you kind of have lifelong. It's really hard. That's why for adults, it can be a never-ending struggle to get rid of that yeast in their gut, right? So you want to get them before 2 if possible. So what are some of the principles? Breastfeed for as long as possible if you can. Probiotics from birth, especially if your baby was born C-section, or after any antibiotics. Introduce fermented foods as early as possible, right? They can be some of your baby's first foods. Fermented foods are an acquired taste, but if you start early, it's going to be part of your child's palate. Now, I put question marks beside the next 2, delaying introduction of solids until at least 6 months and avoiding common allergens until 12 months. That used to be the common thinking. Now we're thinking in terms of food allergies, right? These anaphylactic allergies, perhaps we want to start earlier. Clinically, it's, I still wait typically for kids to be 6 months to introduce solids, but, just look, there may be some different guidance that comes down the pike on that. Of course, eating whole foods, less processed foods, getting the chemicals out, eating organic, at least from that dirty dozen list, eating those at least organically as possible, having as much variety to get all of the different nutrients and phytonutrients that you can to help your gut stay healthy. Essential fatty acids are really key as well, in addition to those probiotics. And really avoiding anything that can cause a leaky gut, right? Trying to minimize the use of antacids or antibiotics by using that integrated medicine toolkit. And if you do need antibiotics, it's not the end of the world, but support the gut, right? With fermented foods and probiotics when you have to take those antibiotics. And then with healing, right? The same 5R program that you use in adult medicine, we do for kids, but we're not going to do it as intensively, right? Kids, like I mentioned, we can just do some small tweaks. So when we're removing, right, we want to figure out what foods to remove. We don't fast. I mean, some adults might do well with fasting protocols for a little bit, but we never fast with kids. With an elimination diet, Carmen and I just spoke a bit about that before, right? We make sure it's a family affair, and we make sure that parents know it is doable, right? If you as a practitioner or health coach have never done an elimination diet, you need to do one, right? Mm-hmm, you just need to try it, right? Just to see how hard it is, how many cravings you might have, right? The mistakes you might make, so you can counsel your patients. Hey, bring the tamari with you when you go to sushi, right? Yes. So you will be a better coach if you do it yourself, right? I think you just have to try it. Do it for a month and see, right? Now, protocols should be flexible and adaptable. It's not a race. Always introduce substitutes first, right? I have parents first try a whole bunch of different gluten-free pastas and substitutes, and get foods into your kids' diet so that when you set that date on the calendar, let's say June 15 is the day we're going to start our elimination diet 100%, you have all these different foods that your kids already eating so they don't feel deprived, they're not going to be hungry, they're not going to lose weight, they're not going to be malnourished. Okay, so always add in first. That's really key for kids. And when you can, work with a great health coach like you, work with a great nutritionist to make sure that your kids are really getting the nutrients they need, right? I have had some kids with the sensory issues, kids on the spectrum, where they do stop eating to a large degree, and they do start losing weight, and we absolutely don't want that, right? So we need to make sure they're still staying nourished. And the elimination diet does have to be for at least 3 months. But for some foods, I never tell parents it's only going to be 3 months, right? Because kids will hear that too. And at 3 months, okay, now I can start eating all the gluten that I want, right? I tell them, at least 3 months, it might take longer. And for some foods like gluten and dairy, you might never be able to have a ton of it. Yeah. Maybe you might be able to tolerate some, right? But I can't guarantee that it can be a free food again. Treating the dysbiosis is really important. Many kids from birth will have dysbiosis. If that mom prenatally had yeast infections, had a UTI, had a bad gut herself, chances are that kid is going to come out, colonized with the same bad bacteria or abnormal yeast and have dysbiosis. And there are some babies who come out born with eczema, right? And these are the kids who have that dysbiosis from the very beginning. So some of the herbal antimicrobials that I typically try to get into kids, MCT oil, right? That's caprylic acid derived from coconut oil. That's probably the easiest to give. Tasteless, pretty easy, gentle. So if you have to, work with the family and they're deciding between what to give, or they can't tolerate the taste of some of the herbs that they were given, suggest that they might want to look into MCT oil. Okay. Biocidin is another herbal formula that I do use that most kids tolerate. Grapefruit seed extract is very bitter, but some kids, can do that, especially if they're swallowing. It's a great overall antimicrobial as well. Digestive enzymes I do use quite a bit, and these are some good chewable ones that you can use as well. A key for digestive enzymes, right? Capsules. You can do capsules with kids. You just open up the capsules and sprinkle the powder and mix into their food or their smoothies. Enzymes are a different story, right? Enzymes, you want to just either put in with a little bit of food with that first bite, or put it in a little bit of water or drink and have them drink it before they eat. If you open up that capsule of digestive enzymes and you mix it into, let's say, their bowl of oatmeal or their bowl of, or their beef stew that they're eating, it sits there long enough, it's going to start digesting what's in front of you, and it's not going to be pretty, right? So you don't want to put that into your food beforehand, okay? And chew, right? We tell this to our adults, but you got to chew, right? Your mouth is the first part of your digestive process. So chewing and letting all those salivary glands start to digest, okay? Probiotics, super important. Prebiotics, if they don't have Klebsiella or Citrobacter, because that can feed those bacteria and cause irritable bowel symptoms. Now, just so you know, as a health coach and practitioner, under 2 years of age, your gut does look different, right? I mentioned over 2 years of age, your gut is pretty much set. It's an adult gut. So over 2 years of age, you can get the same probiotic as an adult. The whole family can get the same probiotic in reality, right? If it's the right probiotic for them. Under 2, there are infant-specific probiotics, right, that have mostly Bifidobacter species. So there is that sort of, kind of arbitrary cutoff. Under 2, I usually give an infant probiotic. Over 2, the same probiotic as an adult. I do have this probiotic guide that I wrote for families, right? So if you want to go ahead and download that, it's a little infographic on, just things to think about when you choose a probiotic. And different things to repair and regenerate. There are a whole host of different supplements that functional medicine practitioners might recommend. But EPA, DHA, that's fish oil. Glutamine is important, and zinc. These are probably the top 3 that I'll recommend. Why zinc? Many, many kids are deficient in zinc. Zinc is mostly from protein. Many kids aren't getting enough protein. But zinc, super important for mucous membrane healing, so gut healing. A big tip off that your kid might be sensitive, low in zinc to start off with anyway, is if they have eczema, right, you need zinc for skin healing as well. Also, if they get frequent infections, right, because zinc is important for the immune system. And if they have sensory issues, low zinc is associated with, you can have kids who just can't stand the tag on the back of their shirt, or loud sounds like the blender or public bathrooms, they're covering their ears, or the seams on their sock really bug them, or they refuse to wear jeans. They can only wear their soft pants because jeans are too hard and scratchy for them.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now rebalancing, right? This is the stress piece. This is a fifth R that was added on not too long ago. When I trained in functional medicine, there were only 4 R's. Now there's this fifth R, rebalancing, but this is super important, right? Super important. And that's where we're going to talk about stress and our kids, right? This mental, emotional, spiritual piece, which is so important. And our kids' stress today, absolutely yes, right? They're stressed, the steam's coming out of their ears all the time, they're over scheduled, right? And I get it. We have 2 working parents in our household, and we need our kids to have activities after school because we just can't be with them in the afternoons. But it is really important to make sure that not all of those are go competitive activities, right? And that you work in downtime, because our cells cannot differentiate between psychic or physiologic stress, right? Our brain and our body interprets all of that as life is not good, right? All of those create inflammation. Doesn't matter. It's not just in your head, right? Physiologic and emotional stress basically creates inflammation.
Yep.
And so the stress response truly engages the heart, mind, emotions, and immune system, right? And some of these kids nowadays, they feel like there's a bear chasing after them all the time, whether it's school pressures or friends or internally driven, or unfortunately, sometimes we as parents inadvertently do that as well, right? So what are our lifestyle management? I talk about this every well child visit, right? I can't hone this in enough. Sleep, sleep, sleep. Our body repairs in our sleep. Kids grow in their sleep. We release growth hormone in our sleep. So if they're not sleeping, they're not growing. If they're not sleeping, they're not detoxifying and they're getting sick, right? So make sleep a priority. I know for some of us, we get home late. This happens with me, and I just want that extra, half an hour to read and snuggle. That's really, you might think it's for your kids, but that's really for you. And I understand how important that is, but make the weekend your time then, right? That you spend all the time snuggling, but on a school night or, a daycare night where they have to be up at 6:30 and out the door by 7 so you can drop them off and get to work. You got to get them to sleep, right? On time. Exercise, really important. Exercise releases all sorts of great endorphins. It helps us to feel better long term, not just for that moment when we're exercising, and better yet, spend it outside, not just for the vitamin D, but because spending time outside in nature really does reduce anxiety and OCD thoughts in our heads. And slow down, right? Just really slow it down, pencil in downtime. I mean, literally, like, we will sit down as a family and look at our calendar. And if we have all these activities in our weekends booked, right? You guys know this, right? You're trying to make a date to just hang out with a friend, a girlfriend, right? And you're like, oh, let's book that in 2.5 months, right? I mean, it's just, if we're too busy, so our kids are too busy. So, I always make sure that we have at least, 1 or 2 weekends out of the month. We're like, nothing is scheduled, right? We might have the swim lesson, but that's it. Right? We don't have play dates. If it happens impromptu last minute, that's fine, but we're not scheduling it in, right? We're leaving that open to allow ourselves to really have flexibility. And if we just want to nap, right? We took a family nap this weekend, all 4 of us. It was amazing, right? Kids can learn how to do yoga. Kids can learn how to meditate, right? Yoga and meditation in kids looks entirely different than it does for us. Kids can walk and meditate. Kids can talk and meditate, right? And essential oils and acupuncture. And these are some resources I put down for you to know, right? I love the books by Dawn Huebner. She's a clinical psychologist who teaches kids themselves to read these books and learn cognitive behavioral therapy techniques. Her first book was called What to Do When You Worry Too Much. And I love her worry box image that I use myself. But she has What to Do When Your Temper Flares, or What to Do When You Grumble Too Much. The Goodnight Caterpillar and Dreaming of Ponies are another two of my favorites by Lori Light. Just kind of progressive relaxation for kids, whether they want to read a story about it or listen to it. And Amy Saltzman, she's actually one of my friends and colleagues here in the Bay Area, but she has a workbook and CD called Mindful Meditation for Children, and another one for teens. That's a great resource. Apps, if you are using screens and with your kids, and some parents choose not to, but there's some amazing apps like Heart Math you can download on your phone. If you don't know what Heart Math is, look it up. I've had kids go through whole acupuncture sessions in my office. 7-year-old just say, "Can I have the Heart Math, Mom?" Put on his ear sensor, breathe deeply, with the Heart Math sensor, and just be in the Zen state while I'm doing my acupuncture points.
I taught that. I did a video on Heart Math a couple of years ago. I
love
think introducing it. My son used it. But he also uses the Calm and the Headspace app, and the Muse headband too. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So great resources for our kids. We often use these, right? A lot of adults use the Headspace app for themselves, but you can absolutely modify and use it for your kids as well. Okay. So, a quick word about toxins, super quick, right? We live in a toxic world. There's toxic exposures in umbilical cord, in breast milk. Sadly, this is not to make anyone feel guilty, but sadly, in our first babies when we breastfeed, we're dumping about 20% of our toxic load on that baby. Actually, I'm sorry, about 80% in that first baby.
Oh my gosh.
So, don't feel guilty. It is what it is, but just know our babies are getting toxins, right? From us, from the environment, from the toys, from their water, from their foods, from medicines and vaccines. They are uniquely vulnerable, right? Pound for pound, they eat more, drink more, breathe more air than we do, right? So they have more exposure, increased susceptibility because their livers are less mature and they can excrete as well. Their blood-brain barrier also is not intact, right? We think, this blood-brain barrier is protected and pristine, but it's not. Okay. And so what we have then is, because of this toxic overload, that is one of the reasons why we're seeing an increase in chronic illness in our kids. But because of that, even when our kids are acutely ill, but when they're not acutely ill, these are insidious exposures, right? It's not like you get exposed to a huge amount of lead and you're sick. These are low-level exposures that all of a sudden, maybe when they're 12, right, they start having joint pains. And we see, it's probably from those past 10 years of exposures. They're sick now, right? But what we need are lifestyle strategies to lower their toxic burden and help them detoxify, right? And not a heavy-duty detox for most of our kids.
Right.
So these are some of the principles you can go through, and I'm sure you're coaching this, but eating whole foods, right? Less processed foods means more nutrient density in our foods, right? And more phytonutrients. Eating that rainbow, right? And making sure that kids really know the rainbow it's not just, you make it a game, right? But it really has so much value on every single system in their body. Eating organic to reduce the exposures to pesticides. Looking up that environmental working group website for the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15, which changes year after year, but strawberries and kale are always on the Dirty Dozen.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Always.
Eating free range and wild, so that we're avoiding arsenic in our chicken, mercury in our fish. Fortunately, we can't get rid of all the mercury and arsenic in fish. But another great guide is this Monterey Bay Aquarium, the Seafood Watch Guide. Depending on where you live, there are going to be fish that are safer and seafood that's safer for you, from an environmental standpoint and also from a toxicity standpoint. Water, right? Making sure that we're drinking filtered water, because there's all sorts of stuff in our water, including pharmaceuticals, including birth control pills and antibiotics in our water. And using glass or stainless steel water bottles if possible. Avoiding food additives. The Environmental Working Group also does have a Dirty Dozen of food additives, but my general rule of thumb for parents: if you can't read it, don't buy it. Right? If you can't, the label should have as few ingredients as possible and be very clear and easy to read.
Right.
Of course, avoiding heavy metals. This is just a resource for some of the sources that parents may not be aware of. in going gluten-free, many parents are going to rice, right? And rice now has found to have high levels of arsenic, unfortunately. So again, same thing, everything in moderation. You don't want to just switch over from 100% gluten to 100% rice.
Right.
Reducing plastics because they are endocrine disruptors. We are seeing a huge wave of kids with precocious puberty. Girls developing breasts now at 8 is not considered too young. I mean, really.
No.
So we need to make sure that we're not doing this inadvertently to our children by exposing them to these endocrine disruptors, mostly found in plastics and cosmetics, right? So using these safer choices, glass, ceramic, cast iron, avoiding plastic, even BPA-free plastic. Unfortunately, there's other things that they put in there.
Of course.
And using clean hair and body care products. Again, the Environmental Working Group is a great resource for cosmetics and safe sunscreens. So, sorry, I ran through a ton, but I want to, definitely leave open for questions.
Oh my gosh.
And I have at the end here, just if anyone's interested, I am working on a pediatric functional medicine training program. Carmen, I'll be sure to tell you about that.
Absolutely.
And then this is more information, again, about my resources. If you want to follow my blog, I'd be thrilled to have you on. I do try to post really good information that is relevant for parents and coaches and practitioners.
Yeah. I'll be sharing all of your links in the replay email, and I'll be putting them in the school, in the course, and the Institute when it opens as well. So they'll have their hands on your stuff, I promise. So here's a couple questions for you. Leah asked, what's the best way to lower yeast in a child outside of diet? Any particular herbs to focus on when they're already doing the gluten-free, dairy-free, no refined sugar, etc.?
Yeah. So I mentioned MCT oil, right? MCT oil is one of my go-tos for antimicrobial anything, right? So whether there's yeast in the gut or abnormal bugs in the gut, it does have very broad activity on different microbes in the gut. So that's, and like I mentioned, it's very easy to give. It's tasteless. I mean, it's an oil that you can find. I do recommend trying to find an MCT oil in a glass bottle. There are some that are sold in plastic bottles, but we carry one that's sold in a glass bottle just so that you don't get any of the other contaminants in there.
Right. Yeah, they're being stored in the plastic. So the other question here we've got from Gabriella, she's asking, is zinc associated with acne in older kids?
You mean zinc deficiency?
I mean, yeah, zinc deficiency.
Guessing, right?
Yep.
It can be, right? Anytime, anything to do with the skin, you want to have zinc, right? Zinc is really important for skin healing, skin repair. And interestingly, I mean, we have these kind of microbiomes everywhere. Our skin has a normal microbiome too, right? So making sure that we're not just using an astringent sort of antibacterial wash, but there are, I think it's O'Hara's makes a probiotic soap, right? What a great way to rebalance your skin and get in that good skin flora. Foods are a huge deal, but foods, unfortunately, it's the pimples that are growing underneath. They are, I mean, the ones that are surfacing, they just have to surface. It takes about a month to kind of surface. So any anti-acne regimen, you really need to keep up with for at least a month to know if it's working, right? So it's not true that you have a piece of chocolate and the very next day you break out. It doesn't work that way.
No.
When you break out, it's usually from something that happened maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks ago. But sugar and dairy, the two biggest factors in acne. So if you can get your teens off of sugar, off of dairy, and you know what? You get teens, you motivate kids where they're at and with what they're interested in and motivated by. So, kids aren't necessarily motivated by this nebulous, oh, you're going to feel better, you're going to get healthier, right? But they are going to be motivated by, your skin's going to be clear for the prom, right?
Yes.
Or, you're going to be able to run down that soccer field and have a more accurate aim at the net. Right? Whatever, you're going to be able to memorize your violin piece, so much easier. Whatever they're invested in, that's what you need to work with. And that's how you motivate kids. right?
Yeah, I
Parents have
agree.
a different motivation, right? But our motivation as parents isn't necessarily what's going to get kids excited to make that change.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit harder to motivate adults actually when it comes to, I've worked with children with acne and other problems. And, one of the motivations for that little girl was, when you're pitching when you're pitching in your games for softball, you won't have to come off the field and ice your elbows and knees and ankles every single time you come off the field. Think of how nice that's going to be that you can hang out with your girlfriends while you're waiting for your turn again.
That's right.
Adults seem to be harder because we have so many more, our minds are in other places. Well, do I need to be motivated to lose weight? Do I want to be motivated to run? Do I want to be like,
Yep, absolutely.
oh,
Yep.
it's gonna be that heart attack we're trying not to have,
Yep.
or that diabetes or whatever.
Yep. Or the hot flashes or the whatever. Right?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm all there on that. Like if I look at it, sometimes I'll look at a glass of wine, I'm like, that looks really good, but I know what comes with it. So I'm gonna avoid the hot flashes tonight. So yeah, that's great. One more question here and we'll go ahead and wrap up. Gabriella is saying, what is the brand of the soap you were just talking about?
Oh, Ohhira, right? Ohhira makes makes probiotics as well. Dr. Ohhira, Ohhira.
Kathy already found it.
But the soap is called Kampuku, K-A-M-P as in Peter, U-K-U.
Yeah.
Kampuku soap.
Awesome. I've got a girl, her name's Kathy. I'm just going to give a big fat shout out to her. Every time I have a webinar or I do a class, she's on and she is like in a second, Johnny on the spot. She's got the answer. I mean, she is so fast and I just appreciate her so much. So makes everything so much easier for everyone, I think. So I appreciate you, Kathy, for always being just right on top of everything. But I'm telling you, this has been just amazing information. And, I call myself the health coach with a functional approach. And when I open up my institute, it's going to be, we're playing with the names, but the Institute for Functional Health Coaching, because I teach so much of what you talked about is where I come from as a health coach, that we teach from a functional perspective and we allow people to feel that empowerment of making decisions for themselves based on learning what's best for them and not what we're telling them to do, but also developing that kind of that triage of care with practitioners like yourself that are skilled and educated to do those steps that we're not allowed or able to do. So I just so grateful for you and just can't thank you enough for your time today.
Oh, you're welcome. I was so excited to do this. It's so important. And as health coaches, if your practitioners aren't seeing kids, you can gently encourage them, you know what? Let's take that leap. This mom with a child who's got rheumatoid arthritis, asked me if we might be able to help. And you can also, kind of be that motivator for your practitioner too, because it's so needed. And, I apologize. I had so much information, but I just wanted to make sure that I got everything out to you. I knew this was going to be recorded so that even I went really fast, but the slides are there for your reference.
Yeah, they can go back and rewatch and screenshot and get some of those great graphics and everything. So thank you so much again. I appreciate you. I hope that you get right through the end of this cold or whatever is going on with no problems and feeling better soon. And I will hopefully see you this fall at Mindshare, correct?
Definitely. I will be there.
I'll hunt you down. Thanks so much again.
Bye, Dr. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.